You're looking at footage from Tunisia, which has been rocked by another political assassination threatening what really seems to have been one of the success stories after the recent Arab Spring. Matt Kaminski, our editorial board member, is here to tell us about it. First of all, the particular assassination that's occurred this week in Tunisia, basically kind of a pattern of opponents who are not part of the Islamist movement or who are moderates basically being targeted by extremists in that country.
Well, this guy was Mohammed Brahmi, his name. He led a small Nasserist nationalist party in Tunisia, was killed outside his home. Only 5 months ago, Chokri Belayid, who's a little bit more prominent politician, also led a sort of leftist alliance who've been very critical of the Islamists. Today, the Minister of Interior in Tunisia said, you know, the same weapon seems to have been used. They named as suspect as a sort of Salafist or hardline Islamist, as, you know, probably having carried this out. This has been a problem in Tunisia starting from the beginning of the revolution. They've done a lot of things well. You know, the election went off very well. They have a fairly moderate Islamist party, which is in coalition with secular parties. Nowhere else have you seen this happen in the Middle East. They've had a fairly smooth process of drawing up a constitution. It's been a very stable place. But the one problem, they've had a religious extremist, small but armed and fairly vicious. I mean, you've had these 2 killings, but you've had attacks on artists. So that's been really the cloud over Tunisia.
And the reason the government has not acted more aggressively is they fear that they will be seen as authoritarian, or is it a political problem because there's a big part of the country that actually backs this sort of hardline Islamist counter-revolution, if you will? I mean, what's the problem there?
It's both those things. And I mean, the support for violence, actually, I mean, it's tiny. These are marginal groups.
Right.
But they do represent, I mean, there's a conservative, they worry they'll be outflanked on their right. And they have this thing called the Naqda Party, which is the Islamist party, which is in power. They won 40% of the votes. They have a plurality, but not a majority. And they're uncomfortable with cracking down on people who, one, look like they're supporters, but 2, behaving like the government that they replaced, because they were themselves accused of being terrorists. Now, that is no excuse, and they've been better over the last few months. I think the Belayid, the first assassination, was a wake-up call. They've said every time they've condemned it. They've sent the troops against these people. But the problem is they haven't arrested anyone in the Belayid assassination, and they haven't been that successful against a sort of the terrorist cells that have sprung up in Tunisia, which has surprised a lot of people because Tunisia was seen as being a fairly moderate, fairly secular, fairly prosperous Arab country.
It seems like, yeah, it was sort of the good news story in that region. And now, speaking of it, if you give us the context of what else is happening, where
it's been a bad few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping for this kind of move toward not just democracy, but a rule of law, a tolerant, moderate. You know, maybe it's too much to hope to say a Western style sort of political polity growing there. But what are you seeing as you look around the region?
Well, the region's having a very, I mean, I think something bigger is happening in the Middle East. You know, we're basically saying the whole region being, the rules of the political game are being redrawn, and we don't know what happened. But, you know, only this week. Today you have massive demonstrations in Egypt that could potentially turn violent because you had the military that carried out a coup earlier this month saying everyone come out in the streets today to fight the terrorists, meaning the Muslim Brotherhood, which had been free elected, which they've forced out of office. You had, in Iraq, there was a big jailbreak on Monday morning where about 500 or so, a lot of them Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists, got out of Abu Ghraib prison to join a growing Sunni insurgency, which has been fed in part by the war in Syria. That war is getting worse. It's destabilizing Iraq, destabilizing Jordan and Lebanon. And the problem is that the U.S. is not willing to be too engaged in all this. It's kind of have a hands-off policy, and that's the other worry, at least for me and other people.
Among many, disturbing. We'll keep following it. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, James.